Hello, my name is Lucy. I'm 65 years old, and I want to tell you about the day everything in my life shifted. I was kneeling beside my beloved dog as she was giving birth, my hands trembling with both fear and joy, when my phone rang. It was my son. His voice was desperate as he said, "Mom, Sarah is at the hospital. She urgently needs a blood transfusion, and your blood is compatible. You have to come now." But something in me froze. After everything she had done to me, after all the ways she had treated me, I couldn't force myself to go. I said the words that would ignite a firestorm: find someone else. I still remember the silence on the other end of the line, sharp, heavy, and final. The next day, the police called me to come to the station. And that was the moment I realized the truth was far darker than I ever imagined. What happened next would reveal secrets hidden inside my own family and put all of us on a collision course with danger, betrayal, and justice. You won't believe what I discovered, or what I had to do to protect the people I love. But before we go any further, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your messages and knowing where you are in the world. Now, let's uncover how this story truly began. The rain started before dusk, the kind that doesn't gently fall but lashes, as if the sky itself has been holding something in for too long. By the time night settled over the house, the windows in my mudroom rattled with every gust. I stood barefoot on the cold tile, the smell of wet fur and impending birth thick in the air. Barnaby paced in wide, heavy circles, his massive paws clicking anxiously. His mate was in the corner, belly heaving, whining softly. Even through the storm, I could feel the trembling anticipation in the room, new life fighting its way into the world. My phone rang. The sound sliced through the air so sharply that for a moment my heart jumped. I wiped my hands on my jeans and looked down at the caller ID glowing in the dim light. Ethan. My son. A spear of dread pushed through my ribs. He never called at night, not anymore. Not since Sarah managed to cut every thread between us except the biological ones. I answered anyway. "Mom, Sarah's in the hospital." Ethan's voice cracked through the speaker, thin and frantic. "She needs blood. Now, you're the only match. Please come." For a moment I couldn't speak. The room seemed to slow, as if even the lights were holding their breath. My gaze drifted, almost unwillingly, to the faint scars on my forearm's silvery little crescents, barely visible unless the light hit them just right. 2 years ago, after Sarah's miscarriage, I had come over as soon as Ethan called, desperate to help, desperate to hold my son steady while he drowned in helplessness. And she had smiled at me with that sugar-sweet emptiness, walked me toward the cellar stairs under the pretense of needing help with something, and accidentally shoved me down 12 steps. I remember the taste of pennies in my mouth, the sound of her voice calling for Ethan, not for help, but for performance, for witness. She had cried louder than I did. Ethan believed her, or maybe he needed to. And now, after everything, he dared to ask me to save her. I took a slow breath. The air felt cold in my lungs, grounding. When I spoke, the words came out calm, ironclad. "Find someone else." I didn't scream. I didn't explain. I didn't remind him of the night his wife almost killed me. I didn't ask why Sarah's need mattered more than my safety. I simply ended the cycle. Then I hung up. The silence afterward buzzed, electric. Barnaby stopped pacing and pressed his massive head against my hip with a low, anxious grunt, as if he sensed that something inside me had shifted, not broken, just realigned. My phone lit up again almost immediately. Texts, one after another, piling in faster than I could read. At first they were pleading, then sharp, then cruel. Ethan's desperation turning into Sarah's handwriting, her tone, her venom, because I knew the rhythm of her insults. I had lived under the shadow of them long enough to recognize their silhouette. I set the phone face down on the counter, refusing to let it stain the air any further. Life was coming into the world tonight. My world, my responsibility, my quiet, imperfect sanctuary. I knelt beside the laboring mother dog, stroking her neck, whispering soft things I used to whisper when Ethan was small and feverish. Barnaby lay down beside us, his giant frame trembling with protective urgency. Every contraction pulled his breath in with hers. Every small whimper of pain made him nudge my elbow, as if urging me to fix it faster. Hours passed slow, aching hours full of rain and thunder and small miracles. 8 puppies. 8 warm, slick, perfect bodies. Their tiny squeaks filled the room like the first notes of a new symphony. I helped clean them, guided each one to nurse, watched as Barnaby hovered with a reverence I had only ever seen in human fathers in moments of quiet awe. Somewhere in the early morning hours, as the storm softened into a gentle patter and the house finally exhaled, I looked at my phone again. Dozens of messages, missed calls, a voicemail from Ethan so panicked it bordered on frantic hysteria. Once, I would have rushed to him. Tonight, I chose myself, and as I watched the puppies settle against their mother, tiny chests rising and falling in unison, I realized something with a clarity that felt like a blade cutting free a long-held knot. I had not refused out of cruelty. I had refused because I was done being a sacrifice. Barnaby lifted his head and looked at me, dark eyes soft and deep, as if he understood, truly understood, the weight of what I had just done. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. I felt unbroken. And when dawn finally crept over the ridge, painting the world in gentle, forgiving light, I whispered into the quiet room, "I'm still here." The rain had softened into a thin, steady drizzle by the time I opened the front door that morning. The boards of the porch were cold beneath my bare feet, and the air smelled like wet cedar and the faint sweetness of the hydrangeas by the steps. For a moment, the quiet felt almost peaceful, until I saw the 2 sheriff's deputies standing stiffly at the bottom of the porch steps, their uniforms darkened by the mist. I froze. Their presence carried a weight I felt in my bones before they even lifted their eyes to mine. Barnaby came to a halt beside me, massive and alert, his body forming a warm wall against my leg. His breath puffed in slow clouds into the damp air. "Ma'am?" one of the deputies began, the brim of his hat dripping. His voice was steady but not unkind. "We have a report that you refuse life-saving medical aid to your daughter-in-law and a petition for emergency. Conservatorship claiming diminished capacity." The words struck me like cold water down the spine. My fingers curled around the doorframe, grounding myself against the sudden spinning in my chest. Diminished capacity. The phrase had a cruel ring to it, clinical and devastating. The kind of term designed to erase a person's credibility, their autonomy, their very adulthood. I swallowed, my throat tight. Conservatorship? The word scraped its way out of me, barely more than a whisper. The deputy extended a stack of papers toward me. Legal forms, stiff and impersonal, with the county seal stamped on the top. As I reached out, my hand trembled small, almost invisible quivers, but I felt them. The papers were heavier than they should have been, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to face. Signed by Ethan. My son's name in blue ink, neat and obedient, like the signature he used on school permission slips when he was 10. I stared at it so long, the letters blurred, swimming in and out of focus. Barnaby sensed something shift in me. He moved forward, planting himself between me and the deputies in a single, decisive step, shoulders squared, head slightly lowered. A deep, warning growl rumbled from his chest, low, thunderous, ancient. The kind of sound that came from instinct, from loyalty older than words. "Easy, boy," I murmured, laying a hand on his back. My fingers sank into his thick fur. He didn't budge. The deputies tensed but didn't reach for their belts. They weren't here to fight. They were here to deliver a blow that had already landed. I forced myself to look up, to meet the deputy's eyes. His face softened, just barely, as if he recognized the exact moment a person's world begins to tilt. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you have the right to contest this. This isn't final." A soft comfort, but not a lie. I nodded, even though my body felt hollow and numb. The drizzle blurred the edges of everything, turning the morning into a watercolor of muted greens and grays. It was then that something caught my eye down the street, a dark shape idling through the mist. Sarah's black SUV. The engine's low hum seeped up the road, steady, almost smug. The windows were tinted so deeply it looked like a void on wheels. But slowly, deliberately, the passenger window rolled down just an inch only enough for her face to emerge in a cold sliver of shadow. Even at a distance, I could feel the chill of her stare. Our eyes met across the length of the neighborhood, across the years she'd spent tightening her hold on Ethan. Across every bruise he tried to hide, every excuse he forced himself to believe. She formed the words silently. "I win." No sound. No smile, just the sharp flick of her lips shaping the victory she thought she'd secured. Something inside me cracked, then, not a break, but a release, like a winter river thawing too fast. A mixture of anger, grief, betrayal, and something fiercer beneath it. Something that felt like the beginning of a roar I hadn't yet let myself speak. Barnabas' growl deepened, vibrating through the porch boards. He didn't understand the details, but he understood me. My breath, my pulse, the way my shoulders stiffened. He understood danger, not just physical, but emotional. The kind that tries to rewrite a person's life from the inside out. I reached down and rested my trembling hand on his head. His growl softened into a protective rumble. The deputy stepped back, giving me space to breathe. Space I didn't know I needed until the morning air finally filled my lungs again. "Thank you," I said quietly, not because I felt grateful, but because they weren't the enemy. They were messengers, caught between a woman fighting for survival and a woman who had learned how to weaponize vulnerability. They nodded, tipped their hats, and retreated down the steps. I watched them walk away, watched Sarah's SUV glide off down the road like a silent predator returning to its den. The drizzle continued to fall, pattering against the roof in soft, unending drops. Inside my chest, something was gathering, not panic, not despair, but a steadier, heavier determination. I stood there for a long time, papers clutched to my chest, rain dampening my hair, Barnaby pressed against my side like a living anchor. And for the first time since Ethan had called last night, I felt the truth settle into me like a seed pushing into soil. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The afternoon light had that soft, golden warmth that only comes after a morning of rain. The air felt clean, washed, almost gentle against my skin as I knelt beside the hydrangeas outside the guest cottage. Their petals were plump from the drizzle, shades of blue and lavender blending like bruises healing slowly over time. I brushed a wet leaf aside, tugging at a cluster of stubborn weeds threading themselves through the roots. There was something grounding in the quiet repetition pull. Loosen, breathe, release. It made me feel steady, if only for a moment. After the deputies, after Sarah's message carved in silence, after Ethan's signature staring at me like a stranger's handwriting, the garden was the only place where the world didn't tilt. Barnaby had been sniffing around the base of the hydrangeas, snorting softly at the damp earth. I didn't think much of it at first. He was always curious, always finding old tennis balls or forgotten stones he treated like treasure. But then his body went rigid, a sudden electric stillness. Barnaby? I brushed dirt from my gloves, rising onto my heels. He pawed at the soil once, twice, then with a burst of frantic energy, he began to dig. Not playful digging, not mischievous. This was different. Desperate. Urgent. His paws worked like a machine. Dirt flying in high arcs that landed across my boots, my jeans, the hydrangea leaves. "Hey, gentle!" What are you doing? I reached toward him, but something in his posture made me stop. His breath came in rough bursts. His tail was stiff, lowered. His body shielded the spot as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. And then he struck something. A dull thud. The scrape of claws against plastic. Barnaby gripped the edge of it with his teeth and pulled. The earth gave way reluctantly, as if guarding its secrets until the very last second. What emerged was a sealed waterproof bag, edges muddied but intact, the kind used on camping trips or by people who needed to hide things they couldn't afford to lose. Or couldn't afford to have found. A shiver slipped down my spine. I picked it up carefully, brushing away clumps of damp soil. Inside was a jumble of darkened paper receipts that had been half burned, their edges curled in fragile black waves. The ink was smeared, but some lines still readable. Not enough to understand everything, but enough to know they weren't trash accidentally buried. Someone had tried to destroy them. And then there were the bottles. 3 empty prescription bottles, rattling lightly inside the bag as I shifted it in my hands. My stomach tightened. The labels were soot-stained, but clear enough to read. The first 1 iron supplement, but the dosage was wrong. Too concentrated. Not standard. The added compounds listed in tiny print made something cold bloom beneath my ribs. The second bottle was completely blank, its label peeled off. The third one carried the words that made my breath stop, sharp and fast. Ferrous sulfate plus additives induces severe anemia when overdosed. I stared at it. My heartbeat stuttered. Anemia, Ethan's weakness, Ethan's constant fatigue, Ethan fainting. Ethan clutching his arm that day, telling me he must have skipped breakfast. The bruises he never explained. The way Sarah hovered too close, spoke too quickly, answered questions for him. The way she pushed the story of my refusal to help, as if she were laying groundwork. My throat closed. The world around me blurred hydrangeas, sunlight, the soft rustle of leaves, all muted under the weight of what this meant. Barnaby pressed against me, whining softly. His head nudged my arm, grounding me, urging me not to collapse beneath the truth unraveling in my hands. I forced myself to breathe. 1 inhale, shaky. 1 exhale, unsteady. The gravel path behind me shifted. A soft crunch. I turned slowly. Ethan stood a few feet away, the sunlight hitting him at an angle that made him look almost translucent. His skin was pale, far too pale. A chalky grayness touched his cheeks, and the shadows beneath his eyes were so deep, it looked as if sleep had long forgotten him. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to sneak into the backyard barefoot, collecting acorns for reasons he never explained. Fragile in a way that made my heart ache even while reality pressed its cold fingers to my spine. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His lips trembled, as if forming words took more strength than his body had left. His shoulders hunched inward, like he was folding in on himself, trying to carry a weight that should never have been his. "Mom," he finally whispered. Barely audible. More breath than voice. There was so much in that single word. Fear, shame, apology, exhaustion. Something that sounded heartbreakingly close to surrender. His eyes flicked to the bag in my hands, and I saw it hit him. The recognition. The horror. He took a step back as if the truth physically pushed him. My first instinct was to reach out to gather him in my arms the way I did when he scraped his knees or woke trembling from nightmares. But I stopped myself. He wasn't a child anymore. And whatever he was carrying now, it was bigger, darker, more dangerous. The air between us tightened, vibrating with unspoken things. "How long?" I whispered, the words cracking mid-air. "Has this been happening?" His jaw clenched. "Once. Hard. I tried. I didn't want." He swallowed, tears swelling but not falling. I thought I could fix it. That nearly broke me. Because it was exactly the kind of thing Ethan would believe. The kind of thing gentlemen told themselves when someone they loved held their heart like a weapon. My fingers dug into the waterproof bag, the plastic crinkling loudly in the quiet afternoon. Barnaby shifted closer to Ethan now, nudging him too softly, carefully, protective of both of us. "I'm so tired, Mom," Ethan whispered, voice thinning like tissue paper. I didn't know what to do. I stepped forward, slow enough not to startle him, steady enough to show him that whatever he feared, he wasn't alone in it anymore. "I know," I murmured. "I know, sweetheart." His breath shuddered out, and he pressed a hand to his forehead, swaying slightly. Barnaby immediately positioned himself under his arm, bracing him with silent devotion. I looked down at the evidence in my hands, burned receipts, empty bottles. A trail Sarah had tried to erase, but had forgotten one thing. Dogs don't forget the smell of danger, and mothers don't forget the shape of their children's fear. The truth was no longer hiding. It was here, raw and trembling, clutched between my fingers and written in the hollowness of Ethan's eyes. And for the first time, I felt something rise inside me, not rage, not panic, but a quiet, unyielding resolve. This was the day everything stopped being confusing. This was the day the pieces finally locked into place. This was the day I understood just how close I'd come to losing my son. The late afternoon light filtered through the kitchen windows in long, amber strokes, soft enough to look gentle, but not gentle enough to change what was happening right in front of me. The room smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon, the remnants of a meal I had barely touched, the kind of meal I kept cooking out of habit, as if a warm dish could fix what had been breaking beneath my roof. Ethan sat across from me at the table. Or rather, he collapsed into the chair, shoulders caved inward, hands trembling slightly as he fidgeted with the stack of crisp documents between us. Conservatorship papers. Legal, cold, clinical, so bluntly detached from the warmth of our home that they felt like artifacts from another world. He pushed them an inch closer. "Mom, please." His voice cracked on the last word, thinning out like a thread pulled too tight. I didn't touch the papers. Not yet. I watched his hands, the faint shake, the half-moon indentations on his palms where his nails had dug in. But what stopped me, what froze everything inside me, were the bruises. Dark circles wrapped around his wrists in uneven bands, not old bruises, not fading ones, fresh, purple blooming into blue, the edges smudged like fingerprints pressed too hard, held too long. A claim staked in violence. The air left my lungs. When? My voice broke. I tried again, softer, because he looked like a loud sound would shatter him. When did this happen? He flinched, pulling his hands back instinctively, hiding the bruises under the sleeves of his sweater. But the fabric rode up just enough to reveal more, the ghost of another mark, the faint outline of pressure near his forearm. "It doesn't matter," he whispered. "It does." I reached forward, not touching him, just bridging the space with my presence. "Ethan, it matters." His jaw worked, clenching and releasing like he was trying to hold something back. Tears, maybe? Or the truth. Or the part of himself that still believed protecting Sarah was the only way to survive her. "She's just stressed." His eyes flicked away. "She doesn't always mean to. I make mistakes. I make her upset. And then his voice thinned. "She's sorry afterward." My heart cracked in slow motion. This was the language of someone living inside a storm he was convinced was his fault. The quiet, suffocated rationalizations of someone who had been worn down piece by piece until the cruelty felt normal. "Ethan," I whispered, my throat burning, "none of this is your fault." His breath hitched. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold himself together. "I just need you to sign." He pushed the papers toward me again, urgency trembling through every word. "If you don't, she'll think I'm choosing you over her, and I'm not." his voice fractured. "I'm not choosing anyone. I just want the fighting to stop. Please, just sign before she gets angry." The room seemed to tilt, because this wasn't fear of conflict. This was fear of her, of what she would do, of what she had already done. His hands hovered near the papers, fingers curled inward like he expected to be struck for hesitating. I could practically see the invisible leash tightening around him. Sarah's voice, Sarah's threats, Sarah's punishments that left bruises blooming under long sleeves. Each moment carved into him, each one more severe than the last. He was shaking, not dramatically, but in these tiny, controlled tremors, like he'd trained himself to keep everything inside, like he had learned that visible fear made things worse. I felt something shift deep in my chest, not a crack, not a snap, forging, something soft turning into iron. "You want me to sign?" I said quietly, meeting his eyes. He nodded, swallowing hard. "So she won't be angry." Another nod, smaller, more desperate. "And you think this will keep you safe?" His breath faltered. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I reached forward slowly, carefully, taking his hand before he could pull away. His skin was cold, too cold. And under my fingertips, I could feel the tension coiled in every muscle. "Ethan," I whispered, "look at me." It took a moment, long enough for my heart to ache, but he finally lifted his eyes. They were hollow in places they never should have been. A child's eyes in a grown man's face, lost, afraid, hoping for something but expecting nothing. "I am not signing these papers," I said softly. He inhaled sharply, panic flooding his features. "Mom, oh please." "If she finds out I came here with them, she won't," I said, steady as stone. "Not from me." He shook his head, a sound escaping him, half sob, half plea. "You don't understand. When she gets angry—" "I understand enough," I whispered, cupping the side of his cheek the way I did when he was small. When he cried because a classmate said something unkind. When he needed reassurance that he mattered. He leaned into my touch without realizing it. A reflex. A memory of safety. I swallowed hard. "That's why I won't sign," I continued. "Not because of pride, not because of spite, but because you are in danger, Ethan, and she knows it. And she's trying to isolate you from the one person who can see it." His eyes glistened, tears clinging to the edges like they were afraid to fall. She said, "You're confused," he whispered. "That you're jealous, that you want to ruin us." I closed my eyes briefly. The cruelty of it, the precision of the manipulation. Sarah, twisting everything, one lie layered over another, until Ethan didn't know where the ground was anymore. When I opened my eyes again, the softness was still there, but beneath it something unwavering. "She can say whatever she wants," I murmured, "but I know who you are, and I know what I see." He looked down at his wrists again, as if the marks themselves were speaking now. "I'm tired, Mom," he said in a voice that broke something inside me. "I'm so tired, I know," I whispered. "But you're not alone anymore." The late afternoon light caught on his tears as one finally slipped free. It trailed slowly down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't apologize for it. Maybe he didn't have the strength to hide anymore. And maybe he didn't need to. Not here. Not with me. I placed my hand over the papers, not to sign them, but to push them gently back toward him. "These are staying here," I said, "and so are you, if you want. No pressure, no fear. Just rest, breathe. Let me help you." His shoulders sagged like someone had unhooked a weight he'd been carrying for far too long. His eyes filled again, but he didn't look away. Something inside me, something maternal and fierce, rose like a tide, not born of panic, but of clarity. Forged steel, strength shaped by love, not anger. Resolve sharpened by the simple, immovable truth. No one hurts my child. Not while I am still standing. I sat on Robert's porch that evening, hands curled around a mug of chamomile tea I wasn't truly drinking. His porch had always felt like neutral ground old timber, peeling paint, wind chimes shaped like little brass birds. A place where truth could settle without breaking anything. But tonight, even the chimes sounded unnervingly sharp, as if the wind itself had opinions it wasn't afraid to voice. Robert adjusted his glasses and held the petition closer to the fading light. At 78, he still read legal language with a precision younger men struggled to fake. His brow furrowed as he scanned each page, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. Then he let out that long, low whistle, the kind that says everything before words even arrive. "If you sign," he said quietly, "she have you in a home and this land sold in 30 days. My stomach twisted, even though I'd already suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed by someone like Roberta, man who'd spent decades watching desperation dress itself in legal clothing, made the air around me feel heavier. He placed the papers on the small table beside him, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. Then he looked at me, not with pity, but with the kind of concern you earn only after surviving things that reshape your bones. "Lucy," he said, leaning forward, "you're not dealing with a frightened girl or an overwhelmed wife. You're dealing with someone who understands exactly how to manipulate fear, and she's counting on you being too exhausted to fight back." I stared at the grain of the porch floor, the fine cracks spidering through the wood. Each line felt like a version of my life split, stretched, repaired, stretched again. "I'm not exhausted," I murmured. "Not anymore." Robert nodded as though he'd expected that shift in me, as though he'd been waiting for it. Barnaby, lying by my feet, nudged my ankle gently, sensing the tremor in my breathing. His presence grounded me the way only an animal who has seen your worst days can. "I won't go to a home," I said, lifting my eyes. "I won't disappear because she wants me out of the way." "She knows you refused the blood donation," he said. "She used that to paint you as unstable, cruel, even dangerous." "I know, and Ethan," his voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ethan's bruisers had spoken for him, those dark, ghostly circles around his wrists, evidence of a story he wasn't ready to tell out loud. "He begged me to sign," I whispered, like it was the only way to keep her calm. Robert exhaled through his nose, slow and heavy. "Fear makes a prisoner out of anyone, even good men." The evening light shifted, sinking deeper behind the pines. A soft orange glow settled over the yard, warming the edges of everything, even the truth that had just carved itself into the space between us. "What do I do?" I asked. Not as someone broken, as someone ready. Robert didn't answer immediately. He reached for the petition again, thumb grazing a corner that had already begun to bend from handling. "We need a confession on tape." The certainty in his voice made my pulse jump, not from fear, but from something steely, something that felt like the echo of my own backbone returning to me. "A confession," I repeated. "She won't give you safety. She won't give you reason. But she will give you arrogance." He paused. "People like Sarah can't resist performing their victories. They need to be heard. They need someone to witness their power." A small, bitter laugh escaped me. "She wants me afraid." "She wants you obedient," Robert corrected. "Which is why she'll show up for anything that guarantees she gets to see you bend." I leaned back in the old rocking chair, letting it creak beneath my weight. The idea sounded impossible and inevitable all at once. "How do I get her to say anything?" I asked. "She's careful." No one is careful at a reconciliation dinner. My breath stilled. The air around us shifted as if the night itself leaned in to hear the rest. "You invite her over?" Robert said. "You say you want to ease tensions. You want to talk things through for Ethan's sake. You cook a meal, set the table, make the whole thing look like surrender." The word tasted like poison. Surrender. "You're not surrendering," he said, squeezing my shoulder. You're giving her the stage. And if there's one thing she can't resist, it's explaining how completely she believes she's winning. The image formed slowly in my mind. Candles on the table, the faint smell of rosemary chicken, the clinking of plates. Sarah sitting across from me with that polished, venomous smile, thinking she had broken me. And somewhere hidden, maybe beneath the floral runner, maybe tucked near the centerpiece's recording device. My heart thudded once. Hard. Barnaby rose from the floor, shaking himself, his tags chiming softly. He leaned his massive head against my knee as if urging me to stand straighter, to breathe deeper, to remember who I was before fear had narrowed my world. "Lucy," Robert said quietly, "you're stronger than she thinks. That's your advantage." I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle into my ribs. When I opened them again, the porch seemed different, still old, still worn, but suddenly a place where decisions were made, not avoided. "She tried to take my autonomy," I whispered. "My home. My son, and you're going to take back your life," Robert said, piece by piece. I nodded once, the way the script of this moment demanded, not dramatic, not loud, but final, in a way that resonated through every part of me. "The reconciliation dinner," he said. "Yes," I replied, "the reconciliation dinner." As I stood to leave, Barnaby pressed against my side, guiding me like a silent second conscience. Robert rose as well, slower than he once would have, but steady. He touched my arm just before I stepped off the porch. "Lucy," he added gently, "you're not doing this alone." The words struck something deep, something long neglected, and suddenly alive again. Because the truth was, I had spent months feeling like a single candle flickering in a storm. But now there were hands shielding the flame, not snuffing it out. I walked back toward my house with Barnaby at my heel, the night cool around us. The sky had deepened into a violet blue streaked with the last traces of sunset, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like my own strength, rising slow, deliberate, undeniable. A plan wasn't hope, but it was the first step toward it. And I was ready. I had never liked coming to Ethan and Sarah's apartment. Even before everything began to unravel, something about the place always felt cold, too curated, too perfect, like a showroom someone pretended to live in. The kind of home where nothing soft ever truly belonged. Still, there I was, in the early afternoon, standing in the silence of their foyer, my hand hovering just a second too long on the door before I finally stepped inside. The spare key felt heavy in my pocket. I'd kept it for years, long after most mothers would have stopped using theirs. A habit born of wanting to help, of wanting to be needed. And now, ironically, it was the very thing helping me uncover what had been hidden in plain sight. Barnaby lumbered past me, his nails clicking softly against the polished floor. He sniffed the air, his head lifting, then turning as though he sensed something wrong beneath the surface. Something dangerous. Seeing him uneasy only tightened the dread in my stomach. The place smelled faintly of lemon cleanser, the kind that coats rather than cleans. A scent that tried too hard to mask what lived underneath. I moved slowly through the hallway, past the aggressively minimalist artwork, past the glass console table that had never once held anything personal, not even a photograph of the life lived here. Everything was white, gold, or sterile. Sarah had always insisted simplicity was aesthetic, but to me it had always felt like absence, like a place where warmth came to die. I reached the bathroom door and pushed it open carefully. The light flicked on with a soft hum, illuminating marble counters and gleaming fixtures. Every product lined up with military precision creams, serums, bottles with elegant fonts and astronomical price tags. Each one a performance. My heart was steady, surprisingly so. Maybe because some part of me had been preparing for this moment long before I admitted it aloud. I opened the mirrored cabinet, the hinges sighing quietly. And there they were, rows of Lemire jars, stacked like trophies. Behind them, hidden only by the assumption that no one would ever look closer, sat a small amber bottle. No label, just a tiny white skull sticker pressed onto its surface. Almost childish in its simplicity, like a warning someone didn't think needed real effort. A private joke, a mark of possession. My fingers wrapped around it. Even before I opened it, my skin knew what it was. A memory struck me. My grandmother's garden shed, the smell of old pesticides. Something metallic. Something wrong. I unscrewed the cap. The scent rose immediately. Bitter, metallic. A cold sting in the back of my throat even though I hadn't breathed deeply. A smell I'd only encountered twice before in my life. Once in a case Robert had told me about years ago, and once in a documentary on forensic toxicology. Fine white powder. Arsenic. Not theoretical. Not diluted. Pure. My breath left me in a single, quiet exhale. The room tilted, not the kind of dizziness that makes you weak, but the kind that makes everything suddenly, violently clear. This was not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. Not anemia. Not stress. This was intent. This was cruelty sharpened into method, and my son had been swallowing this. It closed the lid and slipped the bottle into my pocket, my hands steady even though something deep inside me trembled like a struck wire. Barnaby pressed against my leg, sensing the shift in me. His head nudged my thigh once, firm, grounding, reminding me that I was still here, still whole, still capable of standing. I shut the cabinet slowly, making sure everything looked exactly as I had found it. I smoothed the towel on the rack, straightened a hand soap pump that had shifted half an inch, wiped away a single fingerprint I might have left on the counter. Old habits, living with a husband who'd once measured worth in neatness, can teach you a strange, unfortunate skill set. Just as I stepped into the hallway, the elevator dinged. Not the distant echo of someone else's floor, not the harmless background noise I could ignore. Here, this floor, this apartment. Barnaby's ears shot up. His body tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest like rolling thunder. Not loud, not explosive, but primal protective in a way that made my breath catch. The keys jingled on the other side of the door. Voices. Two silhouettes blurred behind the frosted glass panel. Too early. They weren't supposed to be home yet. I hadn't heard the city traffic or the elevator hum. I'd relied on the assumption that they followed predictable schedules, but predators don't live predictable lives. They move when they choose to. And now that unpredictability was seconds away from walking through the door. I scanned the hallway in a single sweep, no closet near enough to hide in, no exit except the door they were about to enter through. The apartment was too open, too curated for chaos. There were no shadows to disappear into. My pulse climbed up my throat. I thought of Ethan, pale, sunken, whispered apologies stitched into every word he'd spoken. I thought of the bruises on his wrists. I thought of the half-burned receipts Barnaby had unearthed from the dirt near my hydrangeas. I thought of that skull sticker, mocking in its simplicity. I couldn't be caught here. Not now. Not with the bottle in my pocket. Barnaby moved closer, shoulder brushing my hip, his body a shield. For 3 seconds the world stilled. The door clicked. A laugher's, bright, practiced, cutting. A softer voice, Ethan's, strained, fatigued. Then the lock turned. I swallowed once, forcing down fear like it was something I could chew through if I tried hard enough. My hand brushed Barnaby's head, a silent command to stay calm, even though both of us were anything but. The doorknob shifted, and just like that, everything that had been hidden was about to collide with everything I had just discovered. Because they were home, and I was still inside. I don't remember making the decision to move, only the raw instinct that pushed my feet into motion the instant the front door opened. By some miracle, Sarah's back was turned. too busy complaining about the rain streaking her blowout to notice the shape of her mother-in-law slipping down the hall. Barnaby padded beside me, silent despite his size, as though he understood that a single misstep could shatter everything. My heartbeat ricocheted inside my chest, too loud, too frantic. I feared Sarah would hear it. I feared she'd smell it, the truth I'd just discovered living like a burning coal in my pocket. I ducked into their walk-in closet and pulled the door shut behind us just as her heels clicked into the bedroom. The closet was enormous, larger than my first apartment, filled with furs and gowns she rarely wore, but displayed as if luxury itself could shield her from consequence. I pressed myself behind a row of heavy coats, the scent of perfume clinging to the air, expensive, suffocating, artificial. Barnaby squeezed in beside me, his warm body trembling faintly. I placed a hand on his back, trying to steady the shaking in both of us. Through the thin slats of the closet door, a sliver of the bedroom came into view. Sarah moved with practiced ease, shedding her coat, tossing it across the bed with careless elegance. Ethan followed her, slow, dragging, worn down to something barely recognizable as the boy I raised. His shoulders sagged as if each breath cost him something he no longer had to give. My chest tightened so sharply, I had to bite my lip to stop a sound from escaping. And then I saw it. On the dresser. An amber bottle, identical to the one in my pocket. My blood ran cold. Sarah reached for it with an easy familiarity, as though she were grabbing a bit of sugar, nothing dangerous, nothing that could unravel an entire life. She unscrewed the lid, and from my hiding place I saw her lift a small spoon, silver, dainty, wicked in its purpose. She dipped it into the white powder. My breath stilled in my throat. The powder clung to the spoon in a soft mound, glistening faintly in the light. She walked to the counter where Ethan's protein shaker sat waiting, already half filled with almond milk and ice. She tapped the spoon against the rim, and the powder slid inside like something alive, disappearing into the mixture with a whisper. She didn't even check if he was watching. She didn't need to. She'd trained his obedience into muscle memory. When she spoke, her voice was honey-warm, affectionate, lethal. "Drink up, babe," she cooed, running a hand down his arm with mock tenderness. "It'll help with the fatigue." Fatigue she had caused. Fatigue she was cultivating like a gardener, nurturing a slow-growing vine meant to strangle the house it climbs. Ethan nodded, tiredness spilling from every pore. He took the shaker and drank without hesitation, 3 large gulps, then a breath, then 2 more, like a man trying to prove something, or trying to earn peace. From my hiding place, something inside me broke. I pressed my palm against my mouth, desperate to stop the cry rising in my throat. Barnaby pressed his head against my knee, anchoring me to the moment. Sarah smiled at him, a soft, pleased smile. The smile of someone watching their plan advance by inches, by poison. "Good," she murmured. "You'll feel better soon." I had to grip the fur coat beside me just to stay upright. The world narrowed to a single line, the thin slats between me and my child. My heart felt like it was being carved open in a slow, deliberate motion. Every instinct in me screamed to burst out, to knock the shaker from his hands, to drag him away from her, from all of this. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I moved too soon, she'd deny everything. She'd twist it, spin it, weaponize Ethan's confusion and my desperation. She'd file the petition faster, corner me legally, bury me under accusations I'd never crawl out from. We needed evidence. We needed truth that could not be undone. Robert had been right. We needed a confession on tape. And to get that, I had to endure this moment, this horror, without exposing myself. Ethan set the shaker down, swaying slightly. He rubbed his eyes, pressing the heels of his palms into them as if pain were easier to bear than clarity. "I think I'm gonna shower," Sarah said lightly, already untying the belt of her robe. "Join me in a bit, okay? Maybe it'll help you relax." He nodded, slow, compliant. She disappeared into the bathroom. A second later, the water started, sharp and loud, rendering the entire apartment a blur of steam and cascading noise. That was my opening. I inhaled once deep, steady, quiet. Then I nudged Barnaby and slipped out from behind the furs. The closet door creaked so softly it could have been mistaken for the settling of the house itself. Ethan didn't see me. His back was to me. His breathing was uneven, his hand gripping the counter as if trying to keep the world from tilting. I wished, God, how I wished I could go to him, touch his face, tell him I knew, tell him none of this was his fault. But he was too fragile, his mind too clouded, and if he saw me, everything would collapse. Sarah would step out of that shower like a blade ready to slice through whatever hope remained. So I did the only thing I could. I left. Barnaby and I moved through the apartment like ghosts, silent, invisible, slipping down the hallway with practiced care. My fingers brushed the front door handle, and for a moment I felt a sob clawing at my throat, begging to escape. But I swallowed it. I had no room for collapse. Not now. Not when my son's life depended on what came next. The elevator doors opened as if summoned. Barnaby and I stepped inside, and only once the door sealed shut did I let myself breathe, ragged, shaking, the kind of breath that carries both terror and resolve. I touched the bottle in my pocket. Proof. Not enough yet, but enough to begin. As the elevator descended, I whispered into the quiet metal box, my voice barely audible even to myself. Hold on, Ethan. I'm coming for you. And somewhere deep inside me, something that had been trembling for weeks finally hardened into certainty. This was no longer about fear, this was about war. I stood at the head of my dining table, smoothing a hand over the linen one last time. The fabric was soft from years of careful washing, the faint scent of lavender clinging to it like a memory. My mother's best china sat arranged in perfect symmetry white porcelain, with the thin gold rim she used to polish with her thumb whenever she needed to steady herself. The roast beef rested in the center, juices glistening beneath the light. Candles flickered, throwing gentle shadows across the room, warming the wood-paneled walls, softening everything except my intent. Around my neck hung my mother's pearls. I hadn't worn them in years. Tonight, though, they felt less like jewelry and more like armor, each bead a reminder that I came from a line of women who endured storms without bending. Barnaby lay quietly near the hearth, his eyes tracking every movement in the house with an alertness he'd never needed before all this. He knew what tonight meant. Somehow, he always knew. When the doorbell rang, the sound echoed through me like the toll of something ancient and solemn. I took one breath, steady, poised, then crossed the room and opened the door. Sarah swept inside without waiting for an invitation. She didn't just enter, she claimed the space. Her heels clicked on my floor with the arrogance of someone who believed consequences existed only for other people. Her coat hung off one shoulder like she'd rushed here straight from a victory she hadn't earned. She looked around my home with that familiar glint of boredom and superiority, her gaze brushing over my walls, my furniture, my life, as though she were appraising something she intended to sell at a discount. And then she smiled at me, sharp, dismissive, triumphant. "Let's make this quick, Lucy," she said, her voice sugar-coated impatience. Before I could reply, she reached into her handbag and slapped the conservatorship papers down next to the gravy boat. The papers landed with a heavy, insulting thud, the legal threat humming in the air like static. She pushed them slightly toward me with the tip of one manicured finger, as though she couldn't bear to let them touch her any longer than necessary. Her meaning was clear. Sign. Obey. Surrender. Ethan followed her into the room a few seconds later. His posture was tentative, his eyes downcast. He moved like his limbs had weight to them, like gravity tugged harder on him than on anyone else. I saw the exhaustion on his face, the pallor, the slight unsteadiness, the way his hand brushed the wall as if to support himself. I wanted to run to him, gather him into my arms, tell him he wasn't alone, that I knew everything now, that I had proof of what she'd done. But I couldn't, not yet. Not with Sarah's eyes hunting every expression, ready to twist any tenderness into ammunition. So instead, I gave him a small nod, soft enough that only he would understand. He blinked slowly, as if that tiny gesture took effort. Sarah plopped down into her seat, not offering gratitude or even a polite acknowledgement for the dinner I had set so carefully. She looked at the table as though it were beneath her, a quaint, outdated relic of family gatherings she never truly believed in. "Well?" she said, lifting an eyebrow. "Let's not drag this out. You know why we're here." Her tone was firm, but beneath it I sensed something else. Impatience, yes, but also nerves. A faint tremor she tried to hide beneath her confidence. She wanted dominance, control, victory, and she wanted it delivered quickly so she could savor it like a dessert. I didn't sit. Not yet. Instead, I reached for the wine bottle-deep red, full-bodied, something my mother used to call truthful wine, though she never explained what that meant. Tonight, I understood. This wasn't a meal. This was the moment where everything aligned, the evidence in my pocket, the fear in Ethan's eyes, the steel forming quietly inside me. I poured the wine into 3 glasses, the crimson liquid catching the candlelight like molten garnet. The sound of it filled the silence, a delicate, intimate hush. When I lifted my own glass, my smile unfurled slowly, deliberately. I felt the pearls at my throat cool against my skin, reminding me that I had come prepared, that I wasn't the fragile woman Sarah imagined she could bully into submission. "First," I said, my voice calm, warm, deceptively gentle, "a toast to family." Sarah scoffed, barely restraining an eye roll. "Lucy, really," but Ethan looked up at me. His eyes were tired, unfocused, but for a split second something flickered inside them, hope, confusion, longing. He lifted his glass too, though his hand trembled faintly around the stem. I held their gaze, his tender, hers irritated, and finished softly. "It's important." I clinked my glass lightly against his, a subtle touch, a silent message. "I see you. I'm here. Hold on." Sarah lifted hers as well, though her impatience was practically a physical force. "Fine," she said, "to family." Her tone made the words sound like an inconvenience. She drank. I watched her throat move as she swallowed. I watched the confidence settle back over her features, like armor she believed could never crack. She placed her glass down with a sharp clink, leaning back as though she were the queen of this house, and I was merely delaying her coronation. "All right," she said, patting the conservative papers with 2 fingers. "It's now that the sentimental nonsense is out of the way sign." The candle flames quivered. Barnaby lifted his head. Ethan's breath hitched, and inside me something precise and unbreakable aligned into place. Tonight, the truth would surface. Tonight, she would undo herself. But I smiled again softly, sweetly, the way a mother smiles when she knows exactly what storm she's about to unleash. "Of course," I murmured, "but before we get to that, let's talk." And the room shifted just slightly, as if the air itself understood what was coming. I set the amber bottle gently on the table, right between us, the candlelight glinting off the glass like a tiny beacon of truth. For a moment, the room seems to contract around it, the roast beef cooling on its platter, the wine in my glass trembling from the pounding in my chest, even the shadows on the wallpaper drawing inward as if everything in the house knows what that bottle contains. My fingers feel strangely steady, my voice even steadier. "I found your special recipe." The words leave my mouth like frost, controlled, polished, unshaken. But inside I am a storm finally breaking open, a mother who has been burying screams for months, years maybe, without realizing it. Sarah's reaction is instinctive, feral. She lunges across the table with a snarl tearing from her throat. So fast the place settings tremble and a fork clatters to the floor. But before she can even brush the bottle's glass, a sound detonates beneath us, a single explosive bark that ricochets off the walls. Barnaby bursts out from under the table like a force of nature. His paws hit the chair arms beside Sarah, framing her, his massive head level with hers. Not touching, but close enough to make her freeze, close enough for her to feel the power in his stance. Her breath comes in sharp, panicked bursts. And I feel something in me loosen just a fraction, because for once, she isn't the one in control. The flowers in the center vase sway from the commotion, and as they do, I catch the faintest glimmer of red. A tiny LED light blinks among the petals, a little pulse of salvation. Robert's doing. His voice echoes in my memory. We need a confession on tape. But he'd gone further. He always did. Robert, with his decades on the bench, knew exactly what would hold up in court. He knew what would break a liar. He set up everything, somewhere out there, down the lane shrouded by oak trees and fading dusk. Sheriff's deputies wait for the final piece to fall into place, and now it has. Sarah's chest rises and falls rapidly. Her eyes flick toward Ethan, who sits rigid as a statue at the end of the table. His hands tremble. His face is ashen, drawn, and those bruises, those awful purple bands around his wrists, seem to throb in the candlelight. Each one is a fingerprint on his soul. "You're unbelievable," Sarah spits, trying to wrench her gaze away from Barnaby's unblinking stare. "You think waving around some bottle is proof? Ethan will never believe you. He's pathetic." The word hits the air like a poisoned dart. Ethan flinches, just barely, but enough that the sound of it crushes something inside me. For so long I thought he'd grown distant, indifferent, even complicit. But looking at him now, with fear rippling beneath his skin and shame etched into every line of his face, finally understand the depth of his captivity. My voice softens, gentles in a way I didn't expect. "He doesn't have to believe me," I say quietly, each word a thread pulling taut between us. "He just has to live." For the first time, Sarah falters. Her gaze darts from the bottle to me, to Barnaby, back to the blinking red light she finally seems to notice. And then, just as the silence thickens to the point of snapping, the front door detonates open. A thunder of boots fills the entryway, echoing down the hall like rolling thunder. Deputies flood in, their voices commanding, their faces set with the grim certainty of men who already know exactly what they're here for. Sarah Margaret Klein, the lead deputy, announces, his voice ringing clean through the dining room, "You're under arrest for attempted murder." Everything happens at once. Sarah stiffens, shock rippling through her like cold water. Her chair scrapes violently across the floor as deputies move in. Barnaby steps back but stays alert, his weight pressed against my leg, now protective, grounding, warm. And Ethan stares at the amber bottle. His eyes focus on it slowly, as if he's seeing it for the first time. Then he looks down at his shaking hands I used to bandage when he fell off bicycles. Hands I held on his first day of school, hands that now bear the bruises of someone who swore to love him. He lifts his eyes to mine, and for the first time in years, he truly sees me. His face crumples, not dramatically, not loudly, just a soft, breaking fold, like a paper barrier finally collapsing under its own weight. His voice doesn't come. He doesn't need it to, because in that moment, in that single, trembling glance, I feel it all. The apology he's too ashamed to voice, the fear he's been living under, the boy he used to be trying to claw his way back to the surface, the man he might still become if he survives this. Sarah screams something I don't even register as deputies pull her arms behind her back. Her voice fades behind the sound of metal handcuffs clicking closed, behind the groan of the screen door swinging, behind the rustle of Barnaby pressing his head under my hand as if reminding me to breathe. And I do. For the first time in a long time, I breathe in fully, deep, steady. unbroken. Ethan looks at me with tears glistening on his lashes, something fragile and desperate and grateful trembling at the corners of his mouth, and I feel mine mirror his. The danger isn't gone. The healing hasn't begun. But the truth is finally standing in the open with nothing left to hide behind. I take one step toward him. He takes one toward me. And for the first time since Sarah entered our lives, I feel the faint, trembling spark of hope. The porch is softer in the evenings now, as if the wood itself has learned to exhale again. 6 months can change a house, can change a life, can change the air you breathe without you realizing it. Mine carries something I hadn't felt in years quiet. Not the brittle silence of fear, but a gentle, sprawling calm that settles into the corners like golden dust. The sun is sinking low beyond the pines, washing everything in that honeyed glow that only late spring can give. And the breeze carries the smell of cut grass and warm earth. Barnaby is stretched across my feet like an enormous, living blanket, his weight grounding me, his fur warm beneath my hand. Beside him sprawls one of his half-grown puppies, clumsy, long-legged, still discovering how to exist in its own body. He noses my palm whenever I pause in petting, as if reminding me he is there, that he is learning the shape of safety from me just as Ethan once did. My chair creaks as I shift, watching the path that leads from the driveway to the porch steps. I don't even realize I've been waiting until I see him. Ethan walks across the yard with an ease I had forgotten he possessed. Shoulders relaxed, gait steady, head lifted without that instinctive, downward tilt of someone trying to make themselves smaller. The grocery bag swings lightly in his hand, not pressed to his chest like a shield. He's still thin, but not fragile. His skin has color again. His eyes have life. And for the first time since Sarah sank her claws into him, he does not flinch at the wind, or his own shadow, or the sound of a car passing on the road behind him. He moves like a man finally learning the rhythm of freedom. When he reaches the bottom step, he stops. He looks up at me as if gathering courage, not the kind that refuses fear, but the kind that accepts it and walks forward anyway. "Mom," he says, voice low and trembling, "I'm sorry, every day." The words spill from him softly, but I feel them hit the air like something sacred. No grand speeches, no rehearsed lines, just truth. Raw, simple, and trembling at the edges. For months, he has been slowly unwinding the knots she tied around him. Therapy, support groups, long conversations on this porch that ended in tears and new beginnings. Some days he moves forward in leaps, other days in inches. Healing is not a straight line, but he keeps walking. I breathe in the moment, letting it settle deep in my chest, because apologies are not magic. They do not erase the past, but they can build a bridge toward the future. "I know, son," I tell him, my own voice softer than the wind brushing the porch rail. Forgiveness is an action. Keep doing the work. His eyes shine, and for a second he looks like the boy he used to be, the one who brought me dandelions in his fists, who asked me to check the closet for monsters, who believed I could fix anything with a kiss or a whispered promise. I see him, the boy, the man, the survivor. Everything he is blending into that one look. He swallows, shoulders loosening further. "I am," he whispers. Barnaby lifts his head, ears perked, sensing Ethan's emotion the way only dogs can with their whole bodies. He gives a low, approving rumble and thumps his tail once against the porch. The puppy copies him, though the sound is more of an enthusiastic slap that startles itself. I reach down and scratch Barnaby behind the ears. He leans into it with a deep, satisfied sigh, the kind that vibrates through his entire frame. His puppy nestles against him, their fur brushing, their breaths sinking, life continuing, life healing. The horizon glows in bands of pink and gold, softening as the sun dips lower. I look toward it, feeling its warmth on my face even as the day cools. My voice emerges almost without intent, quiet, reflective, but strong, in a way I've grown into, rather than borrowed. I was never just the sweet old lady who gardens, I murmur to the fading sky. I'm the mother bear, and nobody touches my cubs. The words don't carry bitterness, they carry truth. They're an oath I didn't know I needed to speak aloud. The kind of statement you only make after surviving something that tried to swallow you whole. Behind me, inside the house, hangs a framed photograph Ethan gifted me 2 months ago. A picture of us sitting right here on this porch, Barnaby's head wedged between us, all 3 of us laughing at something the puppy did. It's blurry, imperfect, real. It's what we fought for, what we're still fighting for. Ethan steps up onto the porch and places the groceries beside the door. He hesitates only a moment before sitting on the step below me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touch. He leans back, exhales slowly, and lets the quiet wrap around us. The healing kind. The peaceful kind. Barnaby shifts, resting his great head on Ethan's knee. The puppy mirrors the motion a second later. Ethan laughs under his breath, a soft huff of disbelief and gratitude. "Mom?" he says. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me." Emotion catches tight in my throat, hot and sharp and tender at once. There was never a world where I would... He nods, blinking hard, and I let my hand drift to his shoulder light. Steady, steadying. He leans into the touch with a relief that feels like a prayer finally answered. The sun sinks fully behind the pines, leaving the sky dipped in lavender. The porch light flickers on automatically. Barnaby yawns. The puppy rolls onto its back, paws in the air, belly exposed to the vast safety it has known since birth. And I exhale with them. A new dawn isn't always a sunrise. Sometimes it's this: a quiet porch, a healed sun, a loyal dog, a life reclaimed inch by inch. Sometimes it's simply surviving long enough to feel the breeze again and not shrink away from it. I watch Ethan breathe. Slow, even, free. And I know we're going to be okay. If you enjoyed this chapter and want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.